And we are. Let's see now. Okay. Okay, and we are live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this session with the GPA. We have had a busy afternoon and morning here at the GPA. We are already talking about AI and the payroll-driven kind of automation piece from processing to intelligence. So that's on Mel's LinkedIn. So if that's something that you'd like to kind of look at as well. And hello to everybody who is joining us currently. We're going to give it just a moment or two for people to log in and actually join us. But today, I suppose the 7th of June is going to be a date that will go down, I think, a little bit in payroll and HR history. It's been and gone, so now we're looking at what now. It kind of has throwbacks a little bit to TWSS and EWSS. Do you remember those days where you were constantly looking at the daily updates to see what was happening, what were the next updates, what needed to be done? But today we're going to focus on it predominantly from an Irish perspective, but I think it has actually knock-on impacts also for all of the other countries, because again, it is something that is an EU directive. It is country by country at the moment. It is disappointingly not been rolled out in a lot of countries. But today we're going to look at it from an Irish perspective as to where we are at currently, but then also have a general discussion on advice for the payroll and HR departments and what they're what you need to do, that it is just because it isn't actually been I suppose a directive into law as yet. It is actually looking at kind of what do we actually need to put in place, because unfortunately it's not a do I need to do it, it's do it now and get started on it. So I have the lovely Mary Cullen with me from InsightHR. So Mary, I'll let you introduce yourselves to the attendees.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. And thank you for inviting me, Helen, to talk about something that is sending shivers down the spine of most HR people and payroll people, and probably CEOs, CFOs. Really, it's an organization-wide challenge. I'm the managing director of InsightHR, which is a specialist HR consulting company, and we've been working with our clients for quite some time around compliance with the EU directive, despite it not being transposed into Irish law yet. What we have heard is that it will be coming, but when, who knows? Like everything, gender pay gap reporting, it just suddenly came 1 minute in, and people are expected to comply.
Exactly. And it is that kind of I suppose the unknown part of it. But again, it is to kind of look at what can we actually do now and what must we do right now as well. So now it was, I suppose, Ireland is a phenomenal country in that it is a leader in a lot of initiatives. Unfortunately, we were the first ones to actually declare that we weren't going to meet the original June the 7th transposition date. So it was an unfortunate accolade that we got this time. But for anyone who hasn't been tracking it very closely, Mary, because again, it is like on the weeks up to it, it was like constant change. On the weeks since, it's like a constant change as well. there's a lot of, I suppose, what we call noise around it as well, and people interpreting what it actually looks like, what needs to be done, what doesn't. And I suppose that's what prompted our session as well, is that I saw a perspective that you posted with regard to budget on LinkedIn. And I thought it was really interesting because it was something that I hadn't actually seen other people kind of advise businesses on, and the need for that budget piece. And if anybody has any questions during the session, Mary is happy to answer loads and loads of questions, not necessarily about the weather or anything like that, but anything UV transparency linked, feel free to pop in any questions that you have. But just, can you walk us through where things are actually at right now in Ireland, Mary? And like, what does it actually mean that the deadline is missed, what it means and what it doesn't actually mean for employers?
Right. So, I mean, Ireland wasn't ready to transpose the legislation that has come into effect. So it is European-wide right now, despite very few countries actually being ready and complying with the directive or transposing it into their own law. And a lot of the lobbying that's going on at the moment, you might see that from various lobbying firms, and that'll be right across Europe. It's not just Irish-centric, which is basically saying the guidance isn't there for employers to implement this, and therefore the countries themselves are not ready. So they haven't had an opportunity to translate the guidance into, I suppose, codes of practice or advice for Irish or European employers. And that is essentially the crux of the issue. But as I have been saying to our clients and also a lot of Irish businesses, the work that's involved to comply takes quite a long time. So it's not just as simple as no more pay secrecy, no more asking employees or candidates at interview what their pay history was or is, and disclosing at the earliest stages the pay band or salary attached to any particular role. So a lot of employers seem to think that's it, but actually it's a much, much broader scope of work and much, much more detailed scope of work.
Yeah. And you mentioned lobbying, Mary. So just like in terms of the lobbying, like and it is, as you said, not necessarily just in Ireland, but across Europe from industry bodies. Like there's currently in Ireland, like a lot of Dáil questions been kind of tabled. Like, what does that actually mean though? Like, does it actually change anything kind of for the employer's perspective? Like, or is it a kind of, they're hoping that it's going to buy a little bit more time, I think is kind of generally the sense of it. But does it, like, should they be looking at that and taking anything from that lobbying piece?
My view is no. I mean, we do know that the guidance isn't there. But actually, the body of work that needs to be done is job evaluation, and job evaluation is an old HR skill. In fact, it's probably not on a lot of the syllabuses for college anymore. Back in my day, when I trained in HR, it was there. So people of my vintage. I don't like to call myself vintage. Sounds like an old wine. I love the word vintage.
And we all know what happens to wine as it ages, Mary.
Yes, it improves, Helen, absolutely. But it's an old skill, and it's a skill probably that you will see in government sector organizations where there are defined pay grades and salary structures. So the larger an organization, the more likely you are to have clear salary structures. But when you come into the private sector or the not-for-profit sector, you find that the pay decisions that have been made, the historical pay decisions that have been made, actually have created quite a bit of an inequity within organizations. And if you as an organization aren't already looking at your job architecture, the way in which you have made those pay decisions, and aren't aware of inequity within your own salary structures, then you've got quite a bit of work to do to, one, understand what your position is, and two, to look at remediation, because as soon as it's transposed into law, then employees are going to be looking for this information. Trade unions are going to be looking for this information. And part of this legislation, as we understand it now, is going to allow for a joint pay assessment with employee representatives if there's a significant gender pay gap. The whole logic behind this whole directive is because gender pay gap reporting simply has not done enough to close the gap between men and women's pay. And that is the logic behind it. So the European Union have said, no, enough is enough. This is coming. So it's coming down the road, whether it's transposed into law in 2026, 2027, 2028. I think that's probably the wish of a lot of employers, that it'll be a couple of years down the road and they'll know what to do and how to comply with it. But as my mother always said to me, Helen, when I was delaying or procrastinating on work I knew I had to do, or college work, or something I knew I had to do, she, hoping that somehow something magical would happen to get me out of the trouble or the difficulty or the challenge, she used to say, that's just magical thinking, Mary. You need to just get on with it and get practical and get it done. And she's not alive today, but she'd be delighted to hear herself quoted in such quoted many, many times to me. And I say it to our clients, I say it to employers in general. Magical thinking is that somehow the government are going to publish something that's going to allow you to avoid pay inequity that exists within your organization already. And that is from a salary perspective, but it's from a full remuneration perspective, in the sense that it's very much something that employers do need to be thinking about.
Yeah. And as you say, another phrase that's coming into my mind is like, just rip off the plaster. Do you know, it's like going, it's the longer you leave it, the longer it's going to fester. Whereas like, just rip it off and start it. Yeah. And when we talk about ripping off that plaster, Mary, like it's an area that touches so many different areas within the business. It's policy, it's risk, it's rewards, it's HR, it's payroll. And I suppose from our perspective and the community that we support is that payroll piece. And like when it comes down to it, the data is the data. And a lot of that data would sit within, depending on where payroll sits within an organization. It can be finance, it can be HR, it can be in a department on its own as well. But in your experience, when you're looking at it now, like who does the ownership of this tend to land with in organizations as the organizations that you're actually talking to today? And maybe a little bit of that wishful thinking and magic buttons that someone else is going to press that button for them. And where do you actually think it should sit within organizations?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, Helen. I think the CEO needs to be involved in this, the CFO needs to be involved in this, and HR. So it's not a HR project. It's kind of being kicked over to HR because there are elements of pay transparency that HR typically handles. So, for example, as a starting point, you do need to look at every single job description within your organization. And by role, I don't mean that every single individual's job description needs to be reviewed, but by role. And you need to understand how many actual roles there are within the organization. And these are things that, you know, may exist somewhere within the organization on your HR information system. You will have these job descriptions, but how up to date are they? And I know from our client base, and it really doesn't matter what size of an organization you're talking about, from a corporate all the way through to an SME, if the job description isn't accurate, then how can you understand where you're to place individuals when it comes to job evaluation? So as a starting point, the first thing that needs to be done is a review of the job descriptions and an understanding of how many roles you have in place. Once that piece of work is done, then you place people in job families. And, that might be fairly straightforward. For example, if you have nurses, level 1, level 2, level 3, and everybody's doing the exact same job at level 1 and level 2 and level 3, it's fairly easy to say, well, here's the starting point on the salary scale, here's the end point, and this is how our increments work. That doesn't happen in the private sector. It doesn't happen in the not-for-profit sector. It tends to be who shouted the loudest, who can we not live without within the organisation, who did we give extra bonuses to, who have we given extra benefits to, just keep them, just because the market demanded. If, for example, I recruited you 5 years ago, Helen, and I recruited me today, is there going to be a salary differential because the market is tighter? Your skill set might be more demand, and a pay decision gets made on the basis we absolutely must fill this role, because people are shouting in the organisation that the work can't be done, or productivity is falling down, or our bottom line is being affected by it. So we make those pay decisions all the time based on what the market demands are. And this is a fundamental shift, because we're going to have to stop doing that, and we're going to have to make pay decisions based on equity. And while it's targeting men and women particularly, I think it's going to throw up a whole load of pay equity issues around race, religion, sexual orientation, all of those especially protected categories of people, because people will be able to request information in relation to salary that they have never been able to do before.
Yeah. And it's kind of like that hush-hush conversation that you don't have at the water cooler kind of thing, that it's like, oh, I wonder how much they're on, I wonder how much she's on, I wonder how much they, and it's never that conversation piece, whereas now they can, and I think the conversations I've been having as well is that generationally, I suppose as we talked about vintage earlier on, there's a certain generation that would not ask, and just goes, okay, I'm just going to, I'm going to stay here in my own lane and all of that.
Yeah.
But then there's a generation that kind of go, am I worth this? What am I worth? What is X worth? What is Y worth? And why am I getting less? Or, they're not going to ask why they're getting more. But it's like that, I suppose, that the confidence to ask that question as well. And because the law will ultimately support it, but even before the law actually comes in, it is actually that from the 7th of June that employees can ask the question. There mightn't be repercussions currently for employers, but they can actually ask the question and need to get the information with regard to it. So just in that way, go on, Mary. Yeah, sorry. Go on.
Sorry, Helen, to interrupt you. In reality, at any point in Ireland anyway, and certainly in lots of European countries, if somebody believes that they're paid less than a male counterpart, they can always, right now, today and before the 7th of June, they could always find a comparator. So if I happen to know that a man is paid more than me, and I can point to that comparator, I can actually take a claim against the company right now as it stands. What we see happening is that there will be much more of that in the time ahead. And that's why I come back to that magical thinking. No government, no lobby, no piece of guidance is going to change what's unfair and inequitable in your organization. Unless you, the organization, are looking at it and are confident. So anyone who's doing gender pay gap reporting probably knows already what the gender pay gap is, and they probably have worked hard coming up with the narrative around it. But what I see is people have a narrative around it and actually nothing really changes. And so that pay gap is still quite significant. I know I'm sure you and your audience know this better than most, because you see it when you're processing payroll. You see the differential. And the reality is, from an employer perspective, nothing is going to save you from this. So you may as well get on with the work and start doing it now. And that is the significant piece of the work. Yes, review the job descriptions. Yes, look at your policies and procedures. Yes, train your managers on how to handle these conversations. But the biggest bit of it will take months, and that's the job evaluation process. It's not a
Yeah,
simple process. The skill set is in high demand at the moment. The salary range for specialists who can do job evaluation is rocketing.
yeah,
And so these skill sets are going to become more difficult to find.
yeah,
So my view is get in ahead and get the work done and be
yeah,
ready for when that
yeah.
legislation comes into effect.
And I suppose that piece as well with regard to kind of the goals that is mined by all of the payroll people that are out there, that they actually are kind of in control of that and that they actually own and manage a lot of that data as well. So there is like a massive changing landscape with regard to what payroll looks like with there's all of the advent of all the technology, AI and so on that is coming in. But I suppose that is a shout out to anybody then that is actually listening, that it's, if you do have that skill set from a data perspective and a data analysis perspective, and then from a payroll perspective as well, payroll people would be so knowledgeable on their own data that they would actually be able to quite easily know the fields that it comes from. It's all of the different bits and pieces. So that is something that they can actually kind of go to the business with and speak to the business about that piece, and that and I suppose it comes back to that ownership piece as well, Mary, that it's, that the CFO, the CEO ultimately, but I suppose depending on the size of the organization, CFO is possibly the person that's accountable for it, with the CEO, but that HR, payroll, finance, risk, legal are all, this isn't just one person doing one thing. This is a whole band of people that need to come
Yeah.
together and actually put the whole picture together.
Well, if it's not on the CEO agenda or the board agenda, and if it's not on the CFO's agenda, then there's a real issue. And I think one of the things you talked to me about when you saw that article that I had written was the fact that I was saying, when we talk to our clients, there's no budget allocated for this piece of work in a lot of organizations. And that's irrespective of the level of sophistication of those organizations. So it comes back to that magical thinking. What are you going to do if you don't assign some kind of budget to it? And when might you assign the budget to it? Is the budget going to be in 2027? Well, what happens if it comes into effect and the government transpose it before then? What it looks like is going to happen is the government are going to probably do it a bit piecemeal. So the first bits that we expect to happen will be the pay secrecy, the advertisement of roles where the job information is available on advertisement. It looks like that's going to be in Ireland at any rate. It's not everywhere. In other countries, it might be at earlier stages of the recruitment process. But
I think
Ireland,
Estonia has brought quite a lot in, just in terms of the advertisement. They've seen an increase.
Yeah, and I believe the Italians or Italy are ready. So, there in various jurisdictions, there's various levels of readiness. And of course, you're always going to have in Nordic countries are well ahead in terms of equality for women and pay transparency and pay equity. And so, it just depends on the culture. I have a particular concern about Irish business. That's the business that I'm most familiar with. Now, we work with multinationals, we work with businesses with headquarters in Europe, as well as businesses with headquarters in the US. But my concern is because we've had booming economy, boom bust, there's a whole load of pay inequity that we see when we do pay and benefits reviews, when we do these job evaluation projects.
Yeah. And is there any practical steps then that HR payroll could actually take right now? So this week, what could they do this week in order to prepare for it?
Well, for those who have done gender pay gap reporting, and those numbers came down in Ireland, and for those who they will already have that data in terms of pay data, and they will already be aware, I guess, of those gender pay gaps. So again, it's reviewing that particular data again. Job descriptions being reviewed, and the job evaluation process. So when it comes to job evaluation, you're looking at a point factor approach to it, and the key factors that will be considered will be like scope of responsibility, decision making, working environment, the physical and mental requirements of the role, and so these are just some of the factors, and then within that there are sub factors, and that's why I say to you it's quite a complex piece of work. It's a heavy piece of work, and again, while HR might be responsible for carrying out the job evaluation process, they may well need to get specialist HR support or pay and benefits specialisms to come and assist with these projects, because it's not a skill set that exists within organizations, unless you're talking about the public service sector.
Yeah. And it's the knock-on impact as well then in terms of kind of pay grades, pay codes, and the knock-on effect that comes into like the payroll system as well as the finance system and so on, so that it's not actually simply updating something or changing. It's the knock-on impact that it has kind of down the line. And then from what, just in terms of like equal value, like work of equal value, Mary, do you want to discuss that a little bit?
Yeah, so I mean that's a real
term that's been knocked around, kind of, isn't
it? Equal value, and I think where you're going to see most of this is when you come to your management layers, as opposed to maybe general operatives or roles which are lower down within the organization, which are more structured or have more people in them. So, for example, you may well, once you do the job evaluation process, find that the head of marketing, the CFO, the head of sales, and the head of HR are all doing work of equal value, despite doing very different jobs. And that is because what we're going to be looking at when it comes to job evaluation is the physical and mental requirements of the role, the decision-making level within the role, and those various factors that I had mentioned earlier. And this is actually something where you're numerically giving points to each role based on that. So you might well find, which it happens everywhere, the CFO tends to be better paid than the head of HR. The head of sales is generally better paid maybe than the CFO and the head of HR, but they may all be doing work of like value. And that is going to be significant, particularly because, for example, in HR, it tends to be a female-dominated profession. And so if there's pay inequity, if we come to the CFOs, and look, I have worked in large accountancy, one of the top 10 accountancy firms in Ireland. And so I've seen how pay gets handled and who might shout the loudest. And we do know that women tend not to be the strongest negotiators within the workplace, and that for many there is that glass ceiling. And this is what this whole directive is about, is leveling the playing field. So work of equal value is not you and I, Helen, are both in HR, or you and I, Helen, are both in payroll, and therefore it's as simple as categorizing both of us. No, it's not. It's across functions, and they're very different roles, but it may well be considered roles of equal value. And if you have a start and finishing point then on the salary scale, and I'm at the bottom of it and you're at the top of it, and you're just a new recruit, then how fair or equal is that? And what is the organization going to do? And so this is the big challenge. What is the organization going to do? Right now, the gender pay gap reporting requires you to do very little, really, other than publish the information and say what your plan around it is. But there's no real slap or stick if you don't. If you don't. And I think because we already have the gender pay gap reporting portals, it's likely that pay transparency is going to be done through there as well. So I believe it'll happen quite quickly. When the government gets themselves together.
Well, we'll wait that one. But that does not mean that people can sit on their laurels. This is something that needs to be tackled right now. And we've run out of time, Mary, but I just want to finish this on one question, just with regard to kind of the cultural and legal risks, like because Ireland has kind of missed out on giving employers like that longer runway, but not necessarily an easier one. Like, what's your honest take on the risk of organizations kind of using this delay now as a reason to kind of deprioritize the preparation, like from legal exposure point of view, but also from a cultural and from a talent kind of point of view?
Yeah, I mean, it always takes employees a while to catch up with the legislation. It always does. But once they do, what you can expect from an internal perspective are complaints and pointing to the fact that somebody is being paid unfairly. And the complaints are likely to come thick and fast once employees cotton on that they have the right to this information. And the government will publish that very widely when the time comes, as will the WRC. And so the complaints and grievances will start to come in, which immediately represents an operational risk for the organisation, depending on the size of them. If you're in a unionised environment, the trade union may get involved and demand, if there is a significant pay gap, then may well look for a joint pay assessment. And that's a really painful process as well, which no organisation wants to go through. And then we've got claims. In Ireland, we've got the Workplace Relations Commission, where people can bring in a quality claim that they are unfairly paid doing work of equal value to another person, a comparator, and take a claim against the organisation. And then in terms of penalties from the government perspective for non-compliance, we've yet to see what they will look like. But Ireland, as you say, is always at the forefront of embracing legislation. Although they're not ready for this, they're working on it.
If it means money as well, if they're going to earn something, Mary, you never know how quickly they will.
Yeah. And so from a HR perspective, it's this screams of risk. It screams of risk, and that's why it's so important that it's on the CEO, the board level, the CFO agenda, because the risk, the reputational damage, the potential legal costs, every case that's taken takes far more time and resources than you would imagine. And just imagine that at scale if there's serious pay inequity. And every single job evaluation process that we have undertaken over the last number of months, we have found inequity, every single one of them. And the CEO being incredibly surprised, not understanding maybe how that had happened. Where did these decisions come from? And, how could you objectively justify differentials in pay between men and women? And that's just the crux of it.
Yeah. And you're going to be running a couple of workshops in the next couple of weeks, Mary, aren't you? Just with regard to the evaluation framework. So if anybody wants to connect with you on LinkedIn or to have a look at the InsightHR website as well, that there is going to be those kind of the information with regard to it, that they can actually log on and join them.
Masterclasses, Helen, is what we're calling them, on job evaluation. So we're running over the next 6 months, every month, a masterclass in relation to job evaluation. If anyone wants to upskill or take on this kind of a project internally, it's always good to raise your hand and say, hey, I can do it, or I can help. But
exactly.
who
And we
knows?
do have a question in there, Mary, that's just come in
Yeah.
at the last minute. Can we continue to collect or ask candidates for salary data during recruitment now?
That's a really, really good question. And right now, what I would say is you need to get ready to just change. And this is a huge change. So I would be reviewing policies and procedures. I would review your application forms and remove questions around salary, and then look at your gender neutral job advertisements. So any advertisement that looks like it's very much targeting a man versus a woman, you will need to address those as well. And you'd just be surprised how common that is. I mean, all of my career, I've asked every single candidate that I ever interviewed over 25 plus years, what salary are you currently on, and what benefits do you currently have? It's a standard question across every organization everywhere. While you can still ask people what their expectation is, that's an entirely different question to what is your salary history.
Yeah. Brilliant stuff. Mary, is there any sage advice you'd like to leave the viewers with?
Yeah, as my mother said, just do it. Stop the magical thinking and get on with it.
So in order to stop yourself getting all of the sticks on the back or all of the different bits and pieces, get on with it, rip off the plaster and start having the conversations internally, at least, because it shouldn't be, I suppose, predominantly from the viewer's perspective, wherever you're sitting in an organization, it is not your sole responsibility, that this is a bigger piece of work, and the accountability needs to be held quite high in the organization, CEOs and CFO level. But we all know that the work then will need to be completed then by cross teams. So it's a broad team, multiple team effort that is needed to do this. Mary, thank you so much. I'd say we could have a call next week as well, and something might have changed in it as well. It's an ever-moving landscape, I think, just in terms of what countries are doing what. And I think that we can look to the countries that are actually implementing and see what we can learn from them as well, just in terms of what to do, not what to do, and learn from them as well. But thank you, everybody who joined as well, and everybody who will look at this in the future as well. And let's see what the future holds for it all. Thanks, everyone.